Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, May 24th, 2018. It's an incredible thing. Donald Trump on the air right now admitting to the child exploitation taking place at his Mar-a-Lago club in the past couple decades. It's amazing. I mean, I guess you can just say anything at this point because Trump is apparently out there insisting that James Clapper has admitted that they were spying on his campaign, which, of course, he has explicitly denied. But it's okay. The president can just go on TV and say anything. What the hell? And gosh, we'll just see where the process leads us. Let the facts come out. I know you can't allegedly campaign on, we will do XYZ, we will impeach the president, we will turn the country upside down if we win. That's probably not the greatest strategy in the world. However, it is a little bit frustrating, and all I'm saying is you got to vent that frustration every once in a while to find yourself back in 2005 with the strategic approach to the upcoming midterm elections. Gosh, gee whiz, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll let the evidence lead us somewhere, wherever the evidence takes us. And then, of course, that's a great position. But if you then say later on, insist that you're never going to dedicate yourself to uncovering that evidence because, well, there's another election coming, you see how these things tend to go. I'm just saying, I mean, I don't have any perfect solution for it, obviously. There's no way out of this dilemma. We've built it into our system every 2 years. You're always, no further than a year or so from the cycle of another election beginning that you have to begin to worry about. But it's out there. I mean, we've been through the historical pattern, so I'm not wrong. I'm telling you exactly what happened in 2005. And if you take 2006's midterm elections as a good result, or the result you're after anyway, then it's hard to argue. They won. But for how long? It was about 4 years until things were reversed once again, and it's only been about a decade in between the last crazy-ass constitutional crisis and the advent of the next one, which coincidentally, it's going to end up being about 15 years between the peaks of the constitutional crises, which, as I was saying, is coincidentally about exactly what the peak was last time, as between, say, finding ourselves embroiled in, like, Iran-Contra, and then saying, meh, what can you do? And then 15 years later, warrantless wiretapping, indefinite detention, torture. We'll let the facts lead us where they will. 15 years later, maybe we don't need a Justice Department. Emoluments is not in the Constitution. Maybe football players I don't like shouldn't be in the country. I'm just saying that it has happened before. And we can't be, where did this come from? I don't understand. And okay, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, the solution in theory is quote unquote simple, right? You do something about it when the president abuses the Constitution this egregiously in order to lay down the marker. People who do this will face impeachment. But politics being what it is, well, one, you can't guarantee impeachment as between this president or a previous president and a future president. It's no prediction about what'll happen in the in any given future, right? He could end up with another Republican president and another Republican Congress. So you'd find yourself back in the same spot. But it's awfully difficult to believe that things will come out differently, or really that there's any such thing as the impeachment power in I don't even know. Maybe the impeachment power doesn't exist in the Constitution. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. We get into these situations all the time. Should this happen? Can this happen? No, according to the rules, the written rules, it can't. But it is happening. and or they've changed the rules, and I don't know what to tell you. I didn't anticipate just standing everything on its head. Well, here we are again. I mean, if I told you that there's really no way to get rid of a treasonous president, you'd have to believe me, because I guess if you pointed to the Constitution, I'd say, is that the document with the emoluments clause in it? Because I'm having difficulty finding how that applies. It's a discouraging time. You can't, of course, walk away from it, and you can't say, oh, yeah, absolutely everybody in the Democratic leadership must listen to random guy, even if random guy has observed history for some time. So have they. It is not to be overlooked that even in moments of disagreement about strategic approaches to constitutionalism, that when you disagree with somebody very strongly, it's not the case that they haven't also been observing. This is a very difficult line to walk. And one thing I did learn from 2005 is never expect the people in leadership to say the things you wish they were saying. If they are, you probably are in trouble, and you may have gone too far. That's the role of, ironically, of leadership in some ways, is to be led around. Actually, we've run into that a number of times. Leading from behind is a familiar position, and there's only so much wishful thinking you can do about hoping that leaders will break out and speak for the crowd. And by the way, we have one of those, and he's president, and it absolutely sucks. So there is that problem as well. They have to be able to speak and speak well. Here, I'm reaching for words. Greg, help me out if we're looking for words for how do you talk good. You got any words for that?
I got the Constitution right here.
Yeah. That's where we're standing. All right. Well, I don't need anybody's political head, and I don't want to put anything on a pike here. I like the leaders. They're good people. They're smart. I have no alternatives for you for alternative leadership that I think is realistic or helpful. I just wish to express, problem. Yes, I wish to express a dissatisfaction with an historical pattern that is making itself apparent. And that's a different thing from this leader must go in reality right now at this moment. Okay, there. I'm covered, I think. Good morning, and it's Constitutional Crisis Thursday. Yesterday was Constitutional Crisis Wednesday.
But it really is starting to peak a little bit. Yeah. You really get the feeling that something is brewing here.
Right. I thought it was all over on Constitutional Crisis Tuesday, but as it happens, it's extending through the week, and I have never seen this before, that it takes more than a couple hours to resolve a constitutional crisis.
So let me give you a Simon Rosenberg tweet storm here, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it's about leadership. You were talking about leadership.
Yeah.
And there's stuff probably I won't be able to get to today, including the fact that there's still a discharge petition that's picking up steam. They got another Republican to sign on to it. I think they're up to 21, and they need 25, assuming all the Democrats go with it, in order to push immigration options onto the floor that Paul Ryan doesn't want, because he doesn't think it's good for his members to vote on moderate immigration issues when they're trying to be hardline in order to keep the House. And the moderates, what few of them there still are either retiring or don't care and say it's not helping us in our district. We have maybe a combination of high Latino populations, or maybe even more importantly, we have farmers, and farmers need immigrants to do the work. And so we want this to be resolved, and we're pushing you to do it. And leadership keeps saying, that is to say, Paul Ryan keeps saying, don't do that. We need to be hardline. And the House Freedom Caucus says, don't do these moderate things. We want you to do super hardline. And so Paul Ryan, being a weak leader, can't really resolve that. And as a result, the two factions, the House Freedom Caucus on the one end and the House moderates, who are Republicans on the other end, are forcing the issue, despite his efforts to not have it be an issue. And so there's a leadership example for you right there. And that's going to be an interesting one, because I don't think that the discharge petition in this particular case, rare as it may be, and we talked about whether you're trying to push a rule or whether you're trying to push a bill with leadership with discharge petitions.
Yes.
But this is going to play out, and it's going to be interesting.
I think it might play out. What do you think?
I mean,
guess
usually
so, right? It has to.
you go, okay, fine, but it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
This actually might go somewhere.
Okay, I'm good for that. I wouldn't mind seeing it go somewhere. It would be about time. If it doesn't, it'll be a sad and disappointing lesson and a reminder of what usually happens to discharge petitions. You do have to keep that in mind. But this one's getting closer than
usually
usual.
isn't always.
They didn't get rid of it as a useless appendage. It's not the appendix of the House Rules Compendium.
So Simon Rosenberg is writing about leadership.
Well, good for him.
And he's looking at a different kind of leadership.
Someone had to do it.
Let's tell you what he says.
Okay.
He says, from a practical standpoint, the enormity of managing legal and public relations of Trump's many scandals means he can no longer faithfully execute the job of president.
Well,
chief executives of any other institution in the West would have been forced out by
now. Yes. Recalling, of course, that he's not been the chief executive of anything before either. Everyone thinks he has been, but he has not.
Look at his big foreign policy plays. They were all rushed out, not terribly thought through, urgency to each one. He and his spokespeople used the busy calendar to dismiss import of Mueller, and looky, they all fall apart. And when these rushed, ill-considered foreign policy plays fall apart, an adopted public rationale for dismissing Mueller collapsed, the president panicked and dangerously escalated his attacks on legitimacy of the process and the rule of law. Chief executives mired in scandal are removed because there's a practical understanding that their fight for self-preservation will become their primary job.
Yes.
And the entity they lead will be ill-served. As a nation, we're clearly at that point. Status quo is unsustainable. So Trump's made it clear. He believes Mueller and his other scandals are making it impossible for him to do his job. And he's right. But rather than leaving office, he appears to be taking the only other path available to him, which is to discredit, disable Department of Justice, FBI, Mueller, etc. So with the evaporation of the, quote, big man striding the world pushes annoying scandal off to do his job narrative, we're left with the only two possibilities. Trump leaves office or he tries to burn it all down.
Yeah.
Wish I saw some other path, but I don't think so. Dark days ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
So I think
well
it's pretty
said,
good
I should say. Yes, I think so. It made me think, by the way, that I guess down here at number 5 and number 6, making him the scandals making it impossible for him to do the job. Of course, I think we probably all agree it was impossible for him to do the job before the scandals. But
as we talked about yesterday, for example, in North Korea, he has no freaking clue as to what he's doing. And I guess the latest is North Korea is making even more annoying moves, claiming that Trump and Pence and everybody else doesn't really know what they're talking about, and they're risking nuclear war. This is the opportunity, as Noah Rothman pointed out, for Trump to say, okay, I'm walking away from it. But he hasn't, because he needs it so desperately, because he's so much in trouble, and he's trying to distract from all of these actual scandals, which I won't dignify by calling Spygate. And so,
sure,
it's a very good point that this is like 100% of Trump's job right now.
Oh, yes. And as we were saying, I mean, 100% of his job, even without these scandals, was going to be, about making himself the centerpiece anyway. So he really has no time for the rest of the United States. It's just really about him.
Well, to the extent that they pay him, he would like to keep us around.
Yes, that's all. You're useful conduits for cash. If he can't gather it all up himself or pick it off of trees, somebody has to give it to him. That's what the rest of you human bodies are about. But the end of this Trump or this tweet storm from Simon here made me think of sort of the Roger Ailes situation, kind of like that he was the chief executive in a way of, I guess, was he the chief executive officer? I don't know, of Fox News. I guess not.
He ran his title was. He ran
yes,
the place.
But he ran the place, and rather than leaving office, he tried to take that only other path, discredit.
Let's not get bogged down on details. Let's look at the big picture here.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be his model.
He ran the place.
Yes. Okay. So I mean that's clearly going to be Trump's model, and I mean it is different, of course, from other corporate situations in the sense that we select our our president allegedly by electing him. That we didn't at this point, but so it's not like you can just go on the market and hire somebody who has the right resume. And every corporate CEO is replaceable. Every president by design is replaceable too. It's just there's no process by which it's simply accepted to replace somebody midstream, whereas in a corporate setting there is, and that's a big part of it. I mean, the press that's going to be covering it has to believe that this is a right and normal thing to do, and that's very difficult to convince them of. They like things to run pretty much the same way and pretty much predictably.
Right, the way they always have.
Yeah, I mean, they love scandal, and that's an unpredictable thing, but they just like to have a predictable Schedule O scandal. So
yeah, well, they also like to have a predictable narrative.
Yeah.
Like Dem's in disarray, for example,
oh, yes. Or easy.
That sort of thing, because it's easier for them. Mm-hmm. Here's a really fascinating piece from Francis Wilkinson from Bloomberg, looking at how we got here, and pre-Trump.
All of us, yes, okay.
Pre-Trump, it's the GOP assault on law enforcement was inevitable. How Republicans cleared the way for Trump's war. And he talks about the fact that goes back to the Obama years, especially 2011. After Republicans gained control of the House of Representatives in 2011, they claimed that a series of egregious scandals and outrageous crimes ushered forth from every pore of the Barack Obama administration.
Yes.
This was part of the being president while black is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I added that. That's not what the article says. According to this partisan fiction, the nation's most powerful law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, stood idly by as the crimes and corruption accumulated. And it's good to remember some of this stuff that's faded from our consciousness that was such a big deal at the time, at least the Republicans said so. Mm-hmm. In 2010, even before Republicans took control of the House, Representative Darrell Issa told Rush Limbaugh that Obama was one of the most corrupt presidents in modern times. Republican leaders rewarded Issa with the chairmanship of the powerful House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and as chairman, Issa reiterated the charge. In justifying his charge of corruption, he described the $800 billion bank bailout launched in 2008 under Bush.
Yes, right.
As Obama's $800 billion worth of walking around money with no guidelines. That was his quote. Intriguing use of language, says Wilkinson. Walking around money, as dictionary.com points out, is also known as street money. It's what Democratic city political machines used to hand out to entice voters, think black voters, to the polls. Actually, you don't give it to the voters. You usually give it to the centers of neighborhood life to entice people there.
Yeah.
ISIS's inference was that the massive bailout for banks by some fantastical Obama-fied machination had ended up being spread around city neighborhoods with no guidelines, but the FBI was unbothered.
Oh, the bailout went to inner cities, to the local people. I almost forgot about the millions of dollars I saw people walking around with.
Right. Then things got worse. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was accused of dispatching Americans to their deaths in Benghazi. Years of hearings and Republican outrage resulted, but no one person was ever charged, not even with a misdemeanor. The Republicans piled up mounds of accusations of malfeasance and negligence, but where was law enforcement? Don't forget we had 7 committee hearings on that, and Clinton sat through something like 16 hours of testimony, and they had nothing. Then there was the investigation into whether the Obama administration used the Internal Revenue Service to harass conservative groups. Oh, I shouldn't say nothing. We had Kevin McCarthy admitting that the whole thing was really there for politics and to bring her numbers down. That was the purpose. Then there was the investigation into whether and again, let's not get bogged down in details here. That was the big picture that Kevin McCarthy was talking about. Then there was the investigation into whether the Obama administration used the Internal Revenue Service to harass conservative groups, using the IRS for partisan purposes in an unambiguous crime. My question isn't about who's going to resign, House Speaker John Boehner bellowed in 2013. My question is who's going to jail over this scandal? And the answer was no one.
Yeah, your lawnmower repair guy.
No charges were filed. The Fast and Furious scandal, the Republicans spent months and millions of dollars detailing from the public, yielded similar results, which is to say nothing. Nobody
Solyndra
was indicted. And Solyndra, another one. To consumers of legitimate news, And to reporters, politicos, and others paid to pay attention, there's no mystery. The Obama administration was unusually ethical, or it seemed so in the absence of any legitimate oversight by Republicans, and the administration's Republican accusers are pushing one phony scandal after another. But for believers and unskeptical consumers of Fox News, the Obama administration was a crime syndicate that operated with impunity. Lawless, you may recall, was one of Republicans' most common epithets for Obama. Lawless.
Yes.
And in fact, there was a book, Lawless, the Obama administration's unprecedented assault on the Constitution and the rule of law, written by David Bernstein.
Yeah, it was
Bernstein.
huge. And it was interesting. There was actually kind of, sort of, almost actually an argument behind it, but it was about an entirely different set of circumstances, but they just purposely conflated that, which was complaints about overreach via executive order when Congress refused to act.
Yeah, such as DACA, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, and that would be a good example of how there's a legitimate argument somewhere buried in there.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't work out very well because
Which has got nothing to do with
lost on it
scandal.
100 times over in court. But yeah, it has nothing to do with Solyndra or Benghazi or Fast and Furious. But the Fox viewing audience wasn't
I should say it has
inclined
nothing
to
to do with
separate
ethics.
them.
Right?
Okay.
It wasn't that Obama was trying to steal or cheat the American people. It was an argument about what are the limits of executive power.
Yes, that was the actual argument going on. That wasn't how Fox wanted its people to understand it. But
So for nearly a decade, Republican politicians and conservative media have, wittingly or not, been priming conservatives for an assault on the law enforcement agencies that allowed Obama's, quote, lawless, end quote, behavior. Trump's war on law enforcement is not a break from GOP practice. It's a culmination of it. The faux scandals. Remember the Obama administration's czars, let alone his tan suit. Promoted by the Republicans were complemented by even seedier conspiracies promulgated by conservative websites. We'll get to that in a minute.
by the way, I loved the fact that the czars controversy was driven by what was then Republican Russophobia.
Yeah. Obama's mother-in-law was paid a government pension to look after the Obama children, a reader once informed me.
Yeah. I recall that one.
This is the swamp that Trump wants to drain, not the swamp of corruption, but the one of evidence and rules and laws and protocols, the swamp of law enforcement bureaucracies that resolutely decline to lock her up based on mob rage. There's no way to square Republican allegations of scandal with law enforcement inaction. Either Republicans have been misleading the public or law enforcement is crooked. Trump needs to discredit the Russia investigation, and this has heightened the existing contradictions, but they were already glaring. That's the end of his article. So that's true. Either Republicans have been misleading the public or law enforcement is crooked. Well, Republicans have been misleading the public, so that's clear. But
could be both.
The way that they do it is by claiming law enforcement is crooked.
Yes. Now, they might be.
They could be, and they make mistakes and they overreact. And, we haven't really been talking about Black Lives Matter lately, only in the sense of the NFL controversy, which is a different thing altogether, meant to distract from the fact that Trump is actually running a global crime family, and the walls are closing in on him, and it's getting clearer and clearer that he was paid for play from the very beginning, and that's why I said yesterday that really the Democrats don't need to run on impeachment; they need to run on corruption, because that's what this guy is. Now, funnily enough, Jeff Flake gave a commencement speech.
Really?
I guess
not a speech.
Really? Giving at Harvard Law School graduates.
Man, a speech from Flake.
Flake, a Republican who's not seeking re-election, has long been a vocal critic. But on Wednesday, which is yesterday, he said, "Our presidency has been debased by a figure who has a seemingly bottomless appetite for destruction and division and only a passing familiarity with how the Constitution works."
Not even
You might reasonably ask, where's the good news in that? Well, we may have hit bottom. That's also the bad news, but in a rare convergence, the good news and the bad news are the same. Our leadership isn't good, but it probably can't get much worse. Of course, he's wrong.
Oh.
It can get worse, and we're about to see how.
All right. Right now?
Well, here's, for example, David Frum in The Atlantic writing 15 unanswered criminal law questions about Trump. A short and by no means exhaustive list of the open questions swirling around the president, his campaign, his company, and his family, because they're all the same. The president, his company, and his family are like one entity.
That is That's the right way of looking at it.
Right? I've compiled, and another way of looking at it is that, and you can put this in various and sundry ways. Trump is a shape shifter, like Proteus.
Oh.
Okay. He has no core. He has no center. He doesn't care about anything except himself. And that's one of the reasons why he's so hard to hit when you take pot shots at him. Because it's what are you saying? That I said this? Yes, I don't care. I said something totally different today. Which one are you talking about?
Yeah, okay. Not me, but all right. Well, so the media taking pot shots at him.
Critics.
Yeah.
Critics in general.
I mean,
whatever you
I think people
criticize
score
him
all
for,
the time.
chances are he's going to change his position the next day. And how do you make that stick? But since he doesn't care about anything, it's easy for him to change. So here is a list of some of the criminal law questions that are still out there. And I won't read them all. There's 15 of them. But to give you an idea, Trump campaign aides and associates met with Russian agents in advance of the Russian hacks and releases of Democratic internal communications. Did these meetings lead to any form of coordination between the Trump campaign, the Trump family, or Trump supporters on the one hand, and Russian intelligence and its proxy WikiLeaks on the other? Also, Russia engaged in large-scale and illegal expenditures on social media to help elect Trump. Did the Trump campaign, the Trump family, or Trump supporters coordinate or assist in any way with these violations of U.S. law? And how about the representatives of Persian Gulf governments? Same thing.
Yes.
What came of those meetings? So these are the kind of questions that are on the table for Mueller to investigate that we haven't gotten to, and that's one of the things that Trump is afraid of getting exposed.
We haven't gotten to what? You mean just today? Or Mueller in general, or us?
Mueller in general.
Oh, I have a feeling he's gotten to those, but we just don't know about it yet. They've been very tight-lipped. That's true. Well, we can't tell. So, okay, we'll be back after 2 minutes, so you won't be able to tell what we talk about then either. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us after our secret proceedings during the break. We will now reveal the contents of those meetings. Transcripts will be available in a few years, and all the incriminating evidence will be redacted. But, okay, let's continue on then with the unredacted portion of the show.
I think the way to do it is to release the transcript and just get rid of all the vowels.
That's true. I mean...
Right. Vowels lean left, and you can't believe them anyway.
All the redacting people are bored, and they want.
We need solid conservative non-vowels, consonants. That's what we need.
Well, yeah, consonants.
Well, here's some more stuff that still needs to be answered. How much Russian money has flowed into the Trump family and the Trump organization since Trump suddenly and mysteriously became cash rich in 2006? And notice how these are all tied together.
Yes,
right?
That's
it
why
isn't
I feel like
separate
we have
scandals. It's like Trump went broke, all of a sudden became rich. Where did the money come from, and how did that relate to him, therefore being known around the world, at least in seedier quarters, as being pay for play and transactional, so that you knew that you could bribe him? I mean, those are the questions on the table. Did all the foreign funds flowing into the Trump family and Trump organization comply with applicable U.S. laws on taxation and money laundering? Did the Trump family and the Trump organization themselves comply with all U.S. laws on taxation and money laundering? And to what extent was Trump campaign Paul Manafort beholden to foreign entities? What services, if any, did he provide them?
Yeah.
To what extent was Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn, beholden? What services did he provide?
100%.
And the same question to Sam Clovis, George Papadopoulos, and other figures on Trump's campaign and foreign policy teams. And by the way, that's a lot of names.
It's a lot of coffee, boys.
Yep. The family business, then run by Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, was in desperate need of funds in 2016. The record shows he approached entities in China, Russia, and Qatar for aid. What's the exact list of foreign entities solicited by Kushner? What pitch did he offer them? Did his pursuit of these investments ever tilt the administration's foreign policy? After the election, Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, obtained millions of dollars from foreign and domestic businesses in return for his promise to consult with them. Did Cohen share any of these payments in any way with the president, his family, or his businesses? Where's my cut? Since the election, Trump's companies have received millions of dollars in licensing fees from Turkey, the Philippines, India, Indonesia, the UAE, and other foreign countries. How much, or at least entities in them, how much have the president's businesses been paid by foreign persons, and what portion of his total income originates in foreign payments? Is it true, and this is how it all ties together, that Stormy Daniels' daughter was threatened in order to coerce her signing a non-disclosure agreement? And if so, who ordered and delivered the threat? Did any other woman sign such agreements? Were any of them threatened? And was Trump in any way connected to the payment of $1.6 million to former Playboy model Shira Beshard, an agreement facilitated by Cohen, and using the same aliases and structure as the agreement Cohen struck with Stormy Daniels on Trump's behalf? Elliot Broidy, the former deputy finance chair, told the Wall Street Journal he had an affair with Beshard, and she subsequently decided to terminate her pregnancy. He made the first installment of that payment on November 30th. He had a private meeting with Trump on December 2nd, at which he pushed for a crackdown on Qatar. And how did Broidy land that meeting, and why did Trump prove willing to follow his advice? These are some of the legal questions that are out there, and I think they're all legitimate, and they all tie to the same thing. You know, Trump needed money. Where was the money coming from for his various and sundry activities, including paying off Stormy Daniels? Was it foreign money? And was any of that illegal? That's the thing that Mueller has in front of him. And it's complicated, and that's why it's taken so long to figure it out.
Yes, that is true. I mean, I don't know what it feels. It's good to make a list. That's nice.
Lists are good. Some people are list people. You know.
I don't know why. Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, that's true. All those things are on my list. There's other things out there. He said that there was other things out there. I don't know what this does in terms of moving the ball forward, but it doesn't matter. It's a good reminder, certainly. I guess just as I would remind everybody that I think a lot of what we're suffering with under Trump might possibly have been avoided had we impeached the author's boss. But okay. Beyond that.
Yes. But it's not that didn't happen in 2005 or anything, you know. Right. But the thing of the matter is that all of this plays out with the public. And it's up to the public as much as Congress and voting in November on that Congress in terms of whether those ideas are pursued. And so the corruption may lead to people voting on that issue. And if they do and elect the Democratic Congress, that in turn may lead to consequences that will not happen when Republicans control both houses.
That could be.
So how is it playing with the public? There's a new poll from a group called Navigator. And they're actually part of a global strategy group. And the text of their piece today is called, "What Are They Hiding?" Americans want answers on the Mueller investigation, cabinet scandals, and congressional oversight, and Me Too, but it's not all completely clear where that lands. For example, they say in this piece, for many Americans, the cover-up is the crime. When we ask Americans what this investigation is about, they say it's about Russian interference and collusion rather than obstruction of justice and cover-up by a 14-point margin. But when we ask them what concerns them the most, it's the potential for cover-up or obstruction of justice that worries people the most.
Okay. Although I would not be surprised if a lot of people thought collusion meant cover-up. But okay. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't. A collusion means that you're working with somebody. Covering up means you're lying about it.
Right. Well, what if you're working with somebody to cover something up? What is that?
Well, that's a crime.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. I don't know what they call that one, but it's a crime.
So...
Corrosion.
What is Trump hiding? If he's done nothing wrong, let the investigation finish, they say. That's powerful language that beats its time to end it by a huge margin.
Okay, that's good.
Well, who do you agree with more? Those who say that nobody is above the law, not even President of the United States. If President Trump has nothing to hide and has nothing wrong, and has done nothing wrong, then he should just let the investigation finish. 63% of the public agree with that statement compared to the 37% who agree with Those who say it's been over a year since the 2016 election, it's time to move on. If Mueller won't finish the investigation, Congress or the president should move to end it themselves. 2-1, people say no, it needs to finish. Keep that in mind when you hear the rest of the poll numbers.
Okay.
The idea that the American public doesn't understand what's going on or doesn't know what's going on or doesn't care what's going on is simply not true.
Oh, well, that's helpful, given some other things that I've heard, and I anticipate that they come later in this poll.
Yeah, well, here's the one, all right? There have been 22 indictments or guilty pleas.
Yes.
Okay? Now, showing results matters, they say, and relates back to the argument above. If Trump has done nothing wrong, why have there been so many indictments and guilty pleas? So here's the questions that were offered. Mm-hmm. Those who say we should let the investigation finish because it's already made significant discoveries, 22 indictments or guilty pleas, including Trump's former campaign chairman, who's been indicted for conspiracy against the United States of America. And 59% agree with that. In fact, 63% of independents.
Okay.
And only 41% say those who say it's been over a year and Mueller should finish. So the idea is that we should let the investigation finish because it's already made discoveries is a more powerful argument than saying it's been going on too long. However, if you ask it differently and center the argument on Russian meddling, it's a lot less effective. Okay, if you say those who say the investigation is about Russian government interference into the 2016 presidential election and abandoning it would let the Russians get away with it. That's not their exact language, but that's close to what they said. That's 56%. And those who say it's been over a year and if Mueller won't finish the investigation, Congress or the president should move on. That's 44. So that's a smaller margin if you say, well, it's all about the Russian government interference. And you have to finish it because we have to find out what the Russians did. That's actually not as compelling an argument to people because they don't really understand what happened here. Also, you can't leave it up to Mueller. Those who say Robert Mueller is, reliable. He's a director, war veteran, former FBI director, and he should be trusted to finish the investigation gets a 54, and those who say it should end gets a 46. So the bigger issue is when you tell people, you know what, there have been indictments here, and there's a lot going on, and the fact that people have actually been found guilty is really important, and that makes people say, oh, well, there must be something there.
Okay.
Right?
I hope.
But the problem is that most people don't know that there have been indictments.
What? Why not? Yeah, that's true, as it turns out.
Right, it's true as it turns out. The vast majority of Americans have heard about the investigation, but asked simply whether it's uncovered any crimes, 59% of voters say they're not aware of any.
Oh.
Okay?
But they know about
this tells us a lot of things.
WMD.
I mean, it tells us, first of all, it's a good reminder that most people don't pay attention to politics.
True. Okay.
They just don't. Okay? And the second thing is, when you don't have a platform, that is to say, there's no there's no Democratic majority in the House or the Senate, then you don't have the politicians stating this and having the news being forced to carry it because the Senate majority leader said this or the Speaker of the House said that. The current majority leader and Speaker of the House aren't saying those things. And when Democrats in the minority say it, it doesn't get picked up the same way. It doesn't get carried by the news. So how do people learn that there are this many indictments? They get it from the news. If the news isn't reporting it, they're not hearing it.
And sometimes if the news isn't reporting it daily, they don't catch it that day. They don't understand it. They don't hear it. You have to hear it several times usually in order to make a difference.
So people don't like how Trump and Republicans are handling this, but certainly voters are polarized about this. And if you do a word cloud of just asking voters, to give your opinion of the investigation, the biggest words are Trump and witch hunt.
Yes.
And that language is stuck more than any other phrase about it. Oh, there's investigations, election, money laundering, Russia, and all that stuff. But Trump is reaching his base, with his witch hunt stuff. That does not mean that people approve of what the GOP are doing. It doesn't mean that they want the investigation to stop. To me, I take away from this that we're in the middle of the game here, and people really don't know how it's going to end. And how it ends is important. How it ends is going to determine who wins, like any game. And, the thing is that if you look at this and say, well, everybody's just stuck in their partisan positions, that's not really true. The majority of people want this to finish. If they find out that it's going to lead to indictments, and narrator voice, it already has, that definitely influences people's opinion of how this plays out. So, one can easily look at this and say, you know what? It's going to be of interest to see when Mueller finishes. If he finishes before November, that's going to have one effect on the election. And if it's after November, it's going to have a different effect on the election.
Okay. That's true.
In other words, people are persuadable. It's nonsense to say they're not. They're in their partisan corners right now, but that's because they don't have enough information to make a determination. So they're taking their cues from their political leaders. Indictments change all of that. Once you hear about them, then you go, 2-1, that's not good.
Well, or at least I'd like to think it's true.
Well, this is what the poll says. Once you tell them about the indictments, they go, that's important.
That's interesting. I almost wish that someone had told the administration that followed the last criminal one that indictments were important. Right.
So, if you're trying to message on this, if you're trying to talk about this with the public, you have to stress the fact that indictments have already happened. Remind the public that Trump's campaign manager has been indicted, that his national security advisor has pleaded guilty. It's hugely important to add that to any discussion you're having about this. And by the way, that's why it's important that Mueller finishes his job. Doing it in terms of, well, it's important for Mueller to finish his job because we don't want some foreign country like the Russians interfering with our elections is too nebulous, and it doesn't move people.
Okay. Well,
we're all practical people. We're all outcomes based, If you're telling me that, look, whatever we say about the arguments as to Trump trying to tear down the rule of law and this and that, indictments are coming out of this. You can't just dismiss that. Or as they like to say in the parlance of Trump supporters, that ain't fake news.
Speaking of, I'm looming over all, or I guess lingering still over all of this. I'm thinking of the polls. So what was some slight majority of people saying, I don't think it's not led to any indictments. Nothing has come of it. No charges filed in the Mueller investigation. And I guess it's the same people that would tell you, we found the WMD, and God only knows what else. Plus, I'm sure some significant portion of them would say things like, say the former Speaker of the House, who's now considered by some as a member of the resistance and who is now lobbying for marijuana reform, that somehow the administration in between was the most criminal and corrupt of any. And wow. Well,
no, but it's good to go down memory lane and see how we got to where we are. And the Republicans are absolutely complicit in all of this. It's hard not to get that impression from looking at what led to where we are here, as Francis Wilkinson did, and looking at how they defend Trump now, given what we already know, which is a huge, enormous amount of stuff. That David Frum list of questions, ought to be enough to make everybody take pause. And the fact of the matter is that he's still using his hotels and others to, go around the emoluments things, and it's a big deal. And if somebody's indicted over it, it becomes a bigger deal.
Yes, I would like to see that happen.
Well, so would I.
By the way,
but we're not there yet. We're in the middle.
Some breaking news from Daniel Dale. Trump has issued a letter to Kim Jong-un canceling their summit. However, right? I believe I don't know what kind of notice you have to give. When were they supposed to have that? It might not. He might lose the deposit on this. But yes,
it was on the 12th. But I guess it wasn't at a Trump property, so he decided not to do it.
Yeah, I guess that's it. So a letter dated today. I won't read you the letter at the moment because we're still wrapping things up here. But just wanted to let you know the summit is off, and so if you can get a hold of one of those coins, collector item.
But wait a minute, what about his Nobel?
That's still
is that off too?
No.
What about world peace?
He won that. We have it already. That's why go all the way to where were they going? Singapore, and risk being caned. Let me tell you, Trump's not the guy you want to send to Singapore.
Yeah.
But-
Kim Jong-un was afraid of going to Singapore. It was too far away. He didn't have any control over what was going on over there.
So he wasn't going to show up anyway, maybe.
So it was likely, I can't
canceling
say
on
like
you.
it was a definite thing, but there was an awfully good chance he wasn't going to show.
Well,
So,
okay. So
reality
cancel early.
now has come back, and
Mm-hmm.
at least we're not going to the summit where like bad things could happen. But the flip side of the coin is, don't forget, Trump and Bolton are promising
Coin.
really bad things if this doesn't happen. So what happens now? We don't know.
I don't know. We'll cancel those too. Let's issue that letter.
Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the Korean situation and China negotiations on trade and how bad it is to have people who are completely incompetent in charge. And yeah, canceling the summit was absolutely the right move because having the summit in the first place was a terrible move.
Yeah, probably. Now, I mean, he can still
But
make the
now,
same
yeah.
concessions, but there would be less reason to do it and fewer, I don't know what, centerpieces with flowers, things that make Trump happy around.
Parades. He likes
make
parades.
him ebullient, and he might give away the store if you decorate the room correctly. Without that on the table, I assume, I don't know. Unfortunately, it means he goes back to his advisors and begins to listen to them, and that's John Bolton, and that can't be good. But all right, well, now we'll see. We'll see. We've now seen it's canceled, but he did it, so it's a victory. You know.
Well, let's just say that all the chickens are coming home to roost here, and both with foreign policy, which he's not very good at, domestic policy, which he's good at distracting, and crime, which he's quite good at. So let's see what happens when it all comes together. That's my segment for today. Interesting news on the diplomatic front. We have maybe I'll just end with this other different Simon Rosenberg Twitter observation. The most profound part of Trump's illiberal presidency is his unilateral withdrawal of America's generation-long leadership of the West. That this is happening without any real domestic debate makes that much more dispiriting. It's hard to overstate how isolated the U.S. is now. The only nation outside Paris, enormous tension with most important allies, neighbors,
Right.
Trump disrespecting Latin America, Africa. America alone is far less powerful than America's leader of the West, and China and Russia and others are exploiting that weakness. We will not only see snubs from North Korea, China, EU, and others, but as we are seeing in Iraq and Mexico, opposing Trump in the U.S. will become a path to power for leaders across the world. Opposition to the U.S. will become official national policy for many nations. Seeing the impact of U.S. brand erosion already, drop in tourism, applications of foreign students, and if unchanged, will also start affecting our companies and their products. Global consumers will try to buy other brands, and U.S. companies will be less welcome. So none of that's good news, and we're seeing it happen.
Right. It's bad news for the rest of us. Good news, though, for the companies and products that want to replace American ones and need only pay Trump for the exclusive right to do so.
Yeah, well, also known as China.
Yes. ZTE. Our ZTE future is here.
Well, not just that. I mean, they're having these. They're building bridges and roads in Latin America, mostly to exploit the natural resources, and then they'll leave them to fall apart. But that's not the point. Mm-hmm. They're just all over the place doing things, while the U.S. Scales back and doesn't. And they're wanted, and we're not. And this whole North Korea thing is just a small part of the whole big picture of how we're failing at foreign policy. But that's another day and another segment altogether. So we'll wrap that up. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great week. And we'll be back Monday, and I'm sure a lot of stuff is going to happen between now and then because it seems to happen by the hour. Take care, and listen to the show later and see what you have to say about it.
Okay.
Since I never let you get a word in edgewise. So.
Right. Maybe I'll do the show later. How about that?
Hey, that'd be fine.
Okay. Wow. Well, okay. It's a hell of a wrap up, and it's only Thursday. But thanks very much for joining us and bringing us up to speed. And
I like
polling.
big picture things,
Yes.
Don't sweat the details.
Right. Do you have big picture on your wall by any
Giant
chance in your,
pictures,
in your house?
enormous.
I'd like to visit and find out.
Huge.
Everything's oversized.
The biggest, the best.
You don't have any paintings of yourself with, say, Ben Carson.
No, I
Right.
prefer to have big picture paintings of myself with Kim Jong-un, except in the picture I'm really, really big and they're really, really small. It just makes me feel better to look at it.
Yes. Oh, have you seen the comparison, by the way, between that one like Trump fan art guy who paints the ridiculous pictures of him doing super American things, and
Yeah.
North Korean state art that's very similar?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I'll have to retweet that out.
Norman Rockwell on a grand scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the American guy and the
Right.
stuff he does.
It's garbage, but yes.
Yeah, Obama putting everybody in chains and celebrating it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Which just on the
I
face
think
of it is
Eric
incredibly
Kleefield
offensive, but whatever.
had put a couple of these pictures side by side. Apparently, that's an industry in North Korea, which you would expect,
Yeah.
but apparently they're awfully similar. And I can see it right here. Eric Kleefield is the one who tweeted that out yesterday. I sent it out earlier. It's down there in my thread, but we'll include it in the roundup today. And I'll, in fact, while I have you here, I will just grab that URL and send that to you, and I'll retweet it for everybody else who's listening. And,
all right. I'll talk to you later. I got to run.
Very good. Okay. Have a great day. Thanks for your help.
Bye.
Bye. I've left you a little unidentified Twitter icon in Skype for you to take a look at. For the rest of us, let's see if I can I retweet that again? Not from here. I'd have to go into TweetDeck and find that there and retweet. Oh, it's going to be horrible. There it is. Okay, great. And I think, retweet that again and I guess not. Okay, well, you can only retweet these things once. But I recommend that you take a look in Eric Kleefield's tweets. I wonder how, is it highly populated? He seems like a pretty active tweeter, but this is from about 17 hours ago. I promise you, if you scroll down through the tweets and retweets that I have sent out in the last couple of hours, you don't have to go too far down your screen to see this thing. And you will see it in the roundup. I will make sure of that and keep it open so that you can catch up. It's ludicrous and should come as no surprise to you. All right, let's see. Other things to catch up on. I guess I'll mention the fact that somebody threw a glass of water at Tomi Lahren, and that's news. That's it. That's the news. I have no opinion on that. There's plenty of pixels being wasted on whether or not you should or shouldn't be throwing drinks of any kind, water or otherwise, at anyone for their expressed opinions. Generally speaking, I was raised not to throw things at people, and then there's the Nazi punching situation, but I guess she's not quite at that stage, and she didn't get punched, and is it okay to throw water? And maybe you shouldn't waste water, something like that, and I don't know. So you probably wouldn't find me doing it, but I'm having a hard time saying, oh, no, this is terrible for various society-wide big picture reasons. It is, and it's a fair enough argument. It's just, I don't really want to read any of those. And she's really a terrible person. She's not the worst one they've got going, but she's crap in general. I don't feel terribly, terribly, terribly bad about that, and I'm feeling a little guilty about it. So it's my confession for the day. I don't know how to feel about throwing things at Tomi Lahren. So I'm open to it. I'm trying. That's it. You can't argue this with me now, right wing. I'm adopting an open forum, an open mind thing. And I got to tell you, if money is speech, and it isn't, but for these purposes, it is. If money is speech, I think hydrogen and oxygen is speech, quite frankly. And if you combine it in the right proportions, don't overdo it with the oxygen, because then you're talking about hydrogen peroxide. And I think what Tomi Lahren does with hydrogen peroxide is her own business. I don't think you should be interfering. But when it comes to just H2O, which of course we know from chemistry is really, it's 2H2O. There's not a lot of H2O molecules standing by themselves. Yeah, electrons and attractive forces and such. You understand. Anyway, I don't know whether I would recommend throwing water, certainly, but I'm not that terribly disturbed by it. After all, it is water. And I think a conservative approach to this would be, well, water is speech, for one thing, is something that conservatives would surely argue if they were throwing water. And another would be, well, we got to toughen up. America's been wussified. What's wrong with throwing a little water? Well, plenty of things. But if you start throwing it, you'll be pro-water tossing. And I don't want to go that far. I just want to say, man, that shouldn't be done. And leave it at that. So, okay. Moving on. Seriously, I have no guidance for you whatsoever on that. I'm useless when it comes to, I have mixed feelings, and I prefer to move on to other topics. It's just that happened, and I guess I have to acknowledge it and acknowledge that I have no guidance for you. Another thing that I have no guidance for you on, but I believe that many of you who are in the audience would have guidance, and some of you have even offered that guidance to me unsolicited. That is to say, you've brought the issue to my attention and pointed me in the direction of some solutions, but I am not smart enough when it comes to technology to understand what you're talking about. So I thought I would bring it up as a public service to the rest of us. Big news in hacking, I guess we could say, over the last couple of days. And I have 2 or 3 different articles that point to it. The Russians are up to something again, and they're hacking this and that and the other thing, and they are infiltrating people's like home and home office routers, wireless routers. If you have one in your household, you likely have one of the brands that appears to be susceptible to these things. And I want to make you aware of the fact that there's a big news story out there, and make those of you who know what this all means aware that we need some sort of simplified explainer that we can share with everybody. I'll point you to a couple of articles. The Daily Beast has one. Boing Boing has got one. Ars Technica has got one. And those, I think, are 3 very different levels of tech understanding necessary to get the clear picture. But what seems undeniable is that the Russians are at it again. The FBI says they're behind it. I mean, you could dispute that, I suppose, but there's a very definite danger out there we need to be aware of. We'll figure it out. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just taking that brief break. Let's see. We'll catch up with what jokes people have been making over the last minute or so. Zero Hedge out there tweeting with a picture of the commemorative coin from the now canceled summit. If you call in the next 5 minutes for every purchase of the Trump-Kim commemorative coin, you will get another 99 free. Although really, I think that's going in the opposite direction. Surprising that an economic mind like Zero Hedge would miss out on the opportunity to declare these coins collector's items. Now, any kind of a commemorative coin for an event that was supposed to be a big historical moment that got canceled, I think would be a huge collector's item. And so much so that it may even be the case that it is another Trump scheme to corner the market on these valuable collector's items. I don't necessarily think so. Another one of those things that he just sort of stumbled into, although it wouldn't be out of keeping with his track record, accidentally stumbling into something with no planning whatsoever that turns out to be extraordinarily lucrative, even if it was fraudulent or manipulative in its origins. Lots of people reading the letter and saying, oh my God, it's either that it's obvious that Trump didn't write it, or that what does it mean, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, should we read the thing? It's not that revealing. It's a little weird and stilted and stupid. But yeah, perhaps we won't spend any time on it here, and you can read it for yourselves. As I was saying though before the break, we could use a good layperson level explainer of what's going on. The best I think I have got of the writing that's out there would be from the Daily Beast. That is to say, it's my guess that that's the most understandable because it's coming from the most general interest of the publications in which I have found the item written up. Whether or not they've done a good job with it, I'm not 100% sure. It was all baffling to me because I'm a dope when it comes to this stuff. I need specific instructions. If don't tell me things like, well, turn off your blah, blah, blah. I don't know where that is. You got to show me. I'm that bad. I'll eventually figure it out. To be honest, I guess I could sit there and puzzle it out, and I'd find my way there like most people would, but I don't really want to I hate spending time on system maintenance, and I would like specific instructions so I can move on with the rest of my day. But, what can you do? I'll spend a little time to try and prevent the spread of a world-ending virus. Why not? Kevin Poulsen has this piece, which I hope we can zip through rather quickly to give you some idea of what's going on if you're confused or haven't heard the story. Exclusive. FBI seizes control of Russian botnet. Okay. Ordinarily, that sounds like it might be an anti-trolling sort of thing, and it hasn't reached that level yet, but it's actually more like computer virus kind of problem. So I'll start with this one, not only because it's from the most general interest of the publications, but because it starts with the news that they've arrested somebody. The FBI operation targets a piece of sophisticated malware linked to the same Russian hacking group that hit the Democratic National Committee in 2016. That will naturally raise eyebrows among the skeptics who consider it unproven, anyway, that it was Russia that hit the Democratic National Committee and or that it was an actual organized Russian hacking group that has a name that was given to them that's fake or alien to them anyway. We don't know how they identify themselves, if they identify themselves as anything. Anyway, Kevin Poulsen wrote this up yesterday. FBI agents armed with a court order have seized control of a key server in the Kremlin's global botnet of 500,000 hacked routers, the Daily Beast has learned. The move positions the Bureau to build a comprehensive list of victims of the attack and short-circuits Moscow's ability to reinfect its targets. That sounds good. The FBI counter-operation goes after VPN Filter, a piece of sophisticated malware linked to the same Russian hacking group known as Fancy Bear, here in the United States anyway, known as Fancy Bear, that breached the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign during the 2016 election. On Wednesday, security researchers at Cisco and Symantec separately provided new details on the malware, which has turned up in 54 countries, including the United States. VPN Filter uses known vulnerabilities to infect home office routers. Home office routers, like regular people, eh? Made by Linksys, Microtik? That's not Microtech. That's some name, Microtik. Lots of K's in there. Netgear and TP-Link. In all likelihood, about 90% of you have routers made by one of those manufacturers. Maybe not 90%, but a lot. Once in place, the malware reports back to a command and control infrastructure that can install purpose-built plugins. According to the researchers, one plugin lets the hackers eavesdrop on the victim's internet traffic to steal website credentials. Another targets a protocol used in industrial control networks, such as those on the electric grid. A third lets the attacker cripple any or all of the infected devices at will. You getting what's going on here? So, one, they can steal your passwords. Two, the second plug-in, I guess there are three major problems. One of them lets you monitor your internet traffic so they can steal your passwords to places. Two, they can also targeting a protocol used in industrial control networks such as those in the electrical grid. The Internet of Things, basically all these things that are now remotely web controlled, everything from large picture, the electrical grid, to small picture, I guess, like people's home security systems, thermostats, and refrigerators that talk to you and tell you when you're out of milk. It's a big deal. And the third lets the attacker cripple any or all of the infected devices at will. In other words, somebody decides to pull the plug on things and can shut down, well, as many as are infected, but can shut down your router and deny you internet access, period, until you can figure out what the hell's going on and or rebuild your network, or shut down, I guess, things that control things like the electrical grid. It's a big deal. The FBI has been investigating the botnet since at least August. It's a long time. According to court records, when agents in Pittsburgh interviewed a local resident whose home router had been infected with the Russian malware, she voluntarily relinquished her router to the agents, wrote FBI agent Michael McCune, I'm guessing at the pronunciation there, in an affidavit filed in federal court. In addition, the victim allowed the FBI to utilize a network tap on her home network that allowed the FBI to observe the network traffic leaving the home router. That makes a certain amount of sense to me. I understand what the FBI was doing. I'm just amazed that there's anybody who comes home and finds out that something's wrong with her router at all. I mean, unless if it gets shut down, you say, something's wrong. If my router stopped working, I guess I'd be like, dang, my router's broken. Or something happened somewhere along, I don't know. I'd be like throwing the stuff out and starting over again, which might actually not be a bad solution to all this stuff, but it would be very costly. And most people would say, this is a huge pain in the ass. This is terrible. I'm not exactly sure. They might be calling people to come in and repair things. This is obviously somebody got this malware on their equipment and knew what they were doing and knew what they were looking at enough to, imagine me having my computer not work and say, I got to call the FBI. That would never occur to me. But thankfully, I guess it just happens to have happened to somebody who knew what they were doing and knew what they were looking at. So the Bureau basically, with her assent, begins tapping her phone lines, or not the phone lines, but their networking lines over which she was connecting to the internet, and they could see what was coming in and what was going out and where it was going. That allowed the Bureau to identify a key weakness in the malware. If a victim reboots an infected router, the malicious plugins all disappear, and that's a good thing. But the core malware code actually survives. Interesting. And when that happens, if you get rid of all the plugins, reboot, and the malware is still there, the code is programmed to connect over the internet to a command and control infrastructure set up by the hackers. Here's what happens. First, it checks for particular images hosted on photobucket.com. Which seems pretty innocuous. Like if you're monitoring traffic and you see that somebody makes a request for info from photobucket.com, that wouldn't necessarily raise eyebrows, and that's why they chose it, I guess. So it checks for particular images hosted on photobucket.com that held hidden information in the metadata. Now, and that would instruct it what to do at that point. Oh, you got shut down and all the plugins were lost as a result. Well, the regular malware code is still there. It says after a shutdown, call PhotoBucket and look for this photo. And in that photo is metadata. And in that metadata are instructions on how to get those plugins back in there. But if it can't find those images, which have indeed been removed from PhotoBucket since, right? And now, of course, it comes up empty. So it secondarily turns to an emergency backup control point at the hard-coded web address knowall, KNOW.com. Don't know what that is. That might raise some eyebrows. What is it? On Tuesday, FBI agents in Pittsburgh asked federal magistrate judge Lisa Pupo-Lenahan in Pittsburgh for an order directing the domain registration firm VeriSign to hand the knowall.com address over to the FBI in order to further the investigation, disrupt the ongoing criminal activity involving the establishment and use of the botnet, and assist in the remediation efforts, according to court records. Lenahan agreed, and on Wednesday, the Bureau, FBI, took control of the domain knowall.com. So that's a good start in preventing this thing from getting any worse, right? You shut down your router, the core malware is still there, the plugins are gone. It gives instructions to the router to call PhotoBucket looking for info that'll help it get those plugins back. But the PhotoBucket photo is gone, so it comes up empty. So instead it calls knowall.com for the backup instructions. But the FBI has seized the knowall.com domain, and instead of there then being instructions for how to continue your nefarious purposes and reinstall those plugins that allow you to steal passwords and control other people's computers, it either downloads something else entirely, or at the very least turns the contact info, who's calling for this information from knowall.com, The FBI now gets a list of those IP addresses and therefore a map of and a list of who's been infected and who to contact to try to help them get their stuff working again and not be a danger. The move effectively kills the malware's ability to reactivate following a reboot, says Vikram Thakur, technical director at Symantec, who confirmed to the Daily Beast that the domain was taken over by law enforcement on Wednesday, but didn't name the FBI. The payload itself is non-persistent and will not survive if the router is restarted, Thakur said. That payload will vanish. In other words, average consumers have the ability to stop Russia's latest cyber attack by rebooting their routers, which will now reach out to the FBI instead of Russian intelligence. That would be presumably a better thing. According to the court filings, the FBI is collecting the internet IP addresses of every compromised router that phones home to the address so agents can use the information to clean up the global infection. I mean, I don't know how else you would clean up the global infection, but usually people go, I don't like the idea of my IP address being kept on a list by the FBI. But in this case, it's probably a better bet than having that list being kept by Russian intelligence. One of the things they can do is keep track of who is currently infected and who is the victim now and pass that information to the local ISPs, said Thakur. Some of the ISPs have the ability to remotely restart the routers. Others might even send out letters to the home users urging them to do that. The court order only lets the FBI monitor metadata, like the victim's IP address, not content. That's important. As a technical matter, Thakur said there's no danger of the malware sending the FBI a victim's browser history or anything like that. The threat capability is purely to ask for additional payloads, he said. There is no data that is leaked from these routers to the domain that is now controlled by an agency. An agency. It's the FBI. So I guess the takeaway from all that is reboot your routers at a minimum. Do you all know how to do that? Are we sure? If you don't, I guess look it up. Most of you probably have commercially available routers, and it should be a pretty simple thing to figure out, and probably just good, wise security. And I thank a number of people for bringing that to my attention, including, lots of tech folks. Chief Beef Loco is always on that beat, although I can't always figure out what it is I'm being told to do. And not just because sometimes he's a little bit cryptic and fun, but also because it involves tech issues that it must seem amazing to people who understand tech issues, how dumb the rest of us must seem when it comes to these things. It's like, it's so obvious how this stuff works. Some people get things and some people don't. My son amazes me with his work in AP economics. What are you talking about? I don't even understand what this graph is showing. It's so easy. Don't you see that the marginal difference between... No, I don't. And on the other hand, people say, I don't understand how motions to proceed. What is that? It's so easy. Don't you understand? I understand this process. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. So at the moment, we need to work together and do our best to make it simple to get rid of this particular viral infection. Okay. Not our usual kind of news, but clearly something that's important to an awful lot of people. 500,000 at the moment, and hopefully not much more than that. Okay, moving on to other topics of the day. I hinted yesterday that we all ought to be taking at least a quick glance at Brian Beutler's How the Media Rewards Bad Faith. I put it in a link to it in the summary with Scott Abrams' assistance on this, but I'm not certain that you all did your homework. In fact, I know that I didn't do my homework, and so therefore today might be a great Scott Anderson. I know when I say Scott Abrams, I'm thinking of, for some reason I got maybe the tweet of Seth Abrams went by. Scott, sorry about that. Appreciate your including it in the roundup, but we ought to talk about it, discuss it, at least in brief, how the media rewards bad faith. It's just a good explanation, as I understand it, of just sort of the model of what continues to be wrong with our mass media. Even if, not all media, actually, right? Why not throw that in there? Late on Monday, and it seems like an eternity ago, we learned that President Trump has stubbornly resisted staff efforts to secure his smartphones, back on electronic security for the moment, leaving his cameras and microphones vulnerable to bugging and turning his lengthy evening gab sessions with friends and former aides into broadcasts for the world's intelligence services. Oh, duh. It occurs to me right now, I assume it has occurred to at least one of you and probably several million people around the world, but for whatever reason I haven't seen it appear in print, as Donald Trump laments the leaks from the White House, right? We all, of course, suspected at some point that he was the leaker, a la the John Barron and John, what was the other name? John Miller and John Barron pseudonyms that he's used in the past. Or I think there's even been allegations out there in the last couple of months with Trump in the White House of Trump leaking directly to reporters and asking for anonymity and telling them, I want you to attribute it. I'll give you juicy something or other as long as you would attribute it to a senior White House official who most people don't guess is the president of the United States, because ordinarily they don't do things that way, I don't think. But I'm wondering, what about the possibility of all of these being inadvertent leaks? What if he was gabbing on his cell phone and people figured out that, sometimes with police scanners, you can hear cell phone conversations and someone just camps out downtown in D.C. because there's no reporters in D.C., right? No office buildings you could be sitting in near the White House and just hear that stuff, right? Okay. Wouldn't that be hilarious if he was just leaking his own information unintentionally because he refuses to use a secure device? Well, it has been airbrushed out of popular lore, replaced with gauzy platitudes, Brian continues, about populism. But the 2016 election turned to a comical degree on a fabricated consensus among Republicans and the political media that strict adherence to information security protocols was a central qualification for the presidency. But her emails, right? Specifically, Republicans pretended to believe Hillary Clinton had committed a disqualifying and imprisonable crime by using her personal email server to do work when she was Secretary of State. And reporters pretended to believe that these InfoSec concerns were offered up in good faith. Now remember, the big difference here between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is she was doing work. He's goofing off. He can't do work. That's how we know he's not doing it. The notion that Republicans didn't actually care about InfoSec practices and that reporters knew they didn't care isn't just bitter gloss on bygone reporting decisions. It is a fact reporters themselves have led on in their collective response to serial Trump-era InfoSec lapses. It is so taken for granted in the halls of power that Republicans don't actually care about this issue and never did, that nobody even bothers to ask them to square their hair-on-fire behavior in 2016 with their insouciance today. Somebody needs to, take away his thesaurus. 2 years ago, House Speaker Paul Ryan repeatedly and publicly requested that Clinton be stripped of her security clearance because of her email practices. On Tuesday, less than 24 hours after the Trump phone breach story broke, he held a routine Capitol briefing for reporters and fielded 0 questions about it. Trump's laziness has probably left the country's secrets more vulnerable to capture by hostile powers than Clinton's email server, which was more secure than Trump's phone and contained none of the code word intelligence Trump has nonchalantly shared with senior Russian officials, the authoritarian president of the Philippines, and others. To the extent that Trump, an inveterate crook and philanderer, it's actually in there, keeps blackmail material on his phone, his insistence on using easily hacked equipment creates further risk to the national security. Nevertheless, it is arguably reasonable of reporters to tuck this scandal under other larger ones. Trump's administration teems with corruption. He's at the center of a federal criminal investigation, which looks more and more every day like an effort to ascertain whether he and his aides sold out the country's foreign policy to a consortium of authoritarian foreign governments who offered to help him get elected. The fact that Trump is passively lax with national security when he fires up his smartphone pales in comparison to the fact that he actively trades away national security to autocrats. But the fact that Republicans played the political press corps, and worse, that the political press corps consciously allowed itself to be played, is a huge professional failing that should, but by all appearances won't, be accounted for and corrected going forward. Trump's behavior is aberrant enough, and Republican indifference to it is so stark that many reporters now freely acknowledge it calls the sincerity of past conservative fixations with Clinton's email or her health or Bill Clinton's tarmac encounter with Loretta Lynch or Benghazi or what have you into question. Embedded herein some, I guess, illustrative tweets. Maggie Haberman, for instance, tweeting, Trump, who is being investigated for obstruction of justice by DOJ appointed special counsel, consulted with his personal lawyer on his order to DOJ to investigate the investigation into himself. And another tweet from her, this seeks to erase a line, let alone cross it. Imagine reaction if either Clinton consulting with Kendall or Obama with his personal lawyer, and then ordering DOJ to do something related to a probe into them. Right. And many other similar reactions herein embedded from Oliver Darcy, Aswin Subasang, and Chris Salitza, among others, I'm sure. There's a broad and correct media consensus, Brian continues, that Republicans feign outrage about alleged infractions, then proceed to do much worse when in power. How interesting is that? Inoculating yourself against that sort of thing. How about, like, for instance, insisting that the Obama administration is the most corrupt ever in history, and then, upon assuming the office with the immediately next Republican, proceed to actually run the most corrupt administration in American history. That would be a similar thing. So, broad and correct media consensus that Republicans feign outrage, then proceed to do much worse when in power. That right-wing politics is built on a foundation of feigned outrage and bad faith. They know this. That's the broad consensus. But there's also a broad and incorrect consensus that this should not factor into how journalists interpret and report on the parties. If the standard journalists set for themselves, if the standard journalists set for themselves is that anything Republicans claim to be outraged about must be treated as a live controversy, then journalists disclaim a major potential point of failure and become conduits for propaganda. This insulates media organizations from accountability for their handling of the email server matter, but also guarantees that the patterns of the past years will repeat themselves. 1 month ago, a handful of conservatives pretended to be upset about a stand-up comedy routine at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which they pretended to consider indecorous. Everyone knew they were pretending because they had a wonderful time at the dinner and continued to hobnob with their supposed elite media antagonists at black tie after parties when the dinner ended. Everyone knew they were pretending because these self-professed keepers of decorum support Donald Trump. And yet, rather than dismiss their complaints as obvious fabrications, the White House press corps publicly disassociated itself with the comedian Michelle Wolf, who was the Correspondents Association's invited guest. The Wolf incident was the talk of the chattering classes for several days, but for all the wrong reasons. It was only really important as a window into the future. It showed that when the balance of political power shifts again, the right will resume pretending to be outraged over nonsense as if the Trump presidency had never happened, and most reporters will proceed as if it's all sincere. This standard of newsworthiness can be changed in theory, but only if our media institutions decide that bad faith politics should be treated as such and not rewarded indefinitely at the expense of truth. Yes, well, that all seems pretty straightforward and true. Unfortunately, it's going to be awfully hard to believe that the traditional news media is likely to absorb the lesson anytime soon and do something appreciable about it. So, big heavy sigh, and we head into our third break. 2 minutes during which we can try our best anyway to organize the path forward for our last segment heading into Friday. Friday, a great day, of course, for wrapping up and predicting what craziness will happen over the weekend, and for catching up with your contributions to the show, as we will be without our regular guests. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Hey, what do you want to do next? I got some things here I want to get to, and I'm fighting my instinct to turn to them. They seem like better either Friday issues or perhaps more evergreen issues, as I remember for the first time that Monday will be Memorial Day. And what are we going to do? I mean, you can't not do a Monday show. But on the other hand, if we don't, then maybe we shouldn't be in this country. Of course, that would be a reference to Donald Trump's morning appearance. I guess he was on Fox and Friends. I neglected to say anything about it because it was so dumb. But more NFL controversy. You all have heard about it by now, I am sure. Maybe these players who don't want to stand for the national anthem shouldn't even be in this country. More degrading language about political opponents, about which I think I can add nothing other than to note the fact that it is happening and decry it. But yes, for our purposes, will we take Memorial Day off? And, of course, I don't know yet. And I really have to think about that, or begin preparing something for Monday if we are going to be away. Or, you know, we are entitled once in a while to a vacation, but I know that'll leave you hanging. And then over the summer, of course, lots of travel plans, and I've been mulling how to handle some of these lengthier trips and the absences that it could create. And so perhaps, maybe we put together some shows of all these things that I've been planning to share with you that aren't stories that we have to share in the moment or catch up very quickly with, but which are equally important and interesting. So that you have to look forward to. One of these days we'll clear out Pocket, which I think was a goal of last summer's vacation, and it didn't happen. So let's catch up, though, with the more immediate news. How about this one? I have grabbed a report, as usual, from The Hill, because they make it so easy, and I'm lazy like Donald Trump, but also because they tend to grab the juicy bits out of other people's dry toast reports and make them the headlines. In this case, it's this one. 60 Minutes correspondent, you likely heard this story already, Leslie Stahl making these comments. Trump said he attacks the press so no one believes negative coverage. That's the headline over Jacqueline Thompson's piece in The Hill from Tuesday, I guess, including embedded video from the Deadline Club Awards 2018 dinner, a conversation with Judy Woodruff here. Leslie Stahl and Judy Woodruff having this conversation. I assume the Deadline Club is a press organization of some kind, not just a bunch of people, suffering from overwhelming melancholy. 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl says President Trump once told her that he attacks the press so no one will believe the negative stories written about him. Stahl said at the Deadline Club Awards dinner on Tuesday that she met with then GOP presidential nominee at Trump Tower in July of 2016. Boy, lots of people were doing that. And at one point, he started to attack the press, and it's just me and my boss and him. He's attacking the press, and there were no cameras. There was nothing going on, Stahl said. And I said, you know, that is getting tired. Why are you doing this? You're doing it over and over, and it's boring. It's time to end that. You won the nomination. Why do you keep hammering at this? And he said, you know why I do it? I do it to demean you all and to discredit you all, so that when you write negative stories about me, no one will believe you. Stahl said. That sounds like it's something he might say, except it's an awfully organized thought. Trump has repeatedly attacked the media as fake news, of course, since his campaign, often slamming negative reports about his administration. There's a couple of examples embedded in here. I don't really need to give them all time. You know what they are. I just thought that was the most interesting little nugget in the whole story. If you can believe that he has that kind of strategic thought, it's very damning, of course, to say, and problematic to say, I am attacking the press as an institution so that they can't tell the truth about me and have it work. That's very worrisome. And that's all I have to say about that. I mean, what else can you say about something like that? Okay. Other news that needs to be caught up with: the New York Times with the latest entry in the YOLO LOL Nothing Matters folder. Jared Kushner gets security clearance, ending swirl of questions over delay. Of course, it does not end anything. The questions, the swirl, maybe it stops the swirl. We all are just told, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. No reason to have questions about this anymore. It's happening despite the questions. Matt Apuzzo reporting for the New York Times. Jared Kushner, you know who he is, has been granted his permanent security clearance. A person briefed on the matter said on Wednesday, ending a period of uncertainty, anyway, that had fueled questions about whether Mr. Kushner was in peril in the special counsel investigation. I don't think it ends questions about that at all, but okay. Kushner is a senior presidential aide with a prominent role in the Middle East. His FBI background checks, though, dragged on for a year and became one of many political distractions for the White House. Even some inside the administration suspected that Kushner's delay reflected legal problems on the horizon. And I don't think that the granting now clears those up, by the way. I think that's a serious misreading of the situation. We'll add a little bit to this picture in order to let you see why I think that's the case. The permanent clearances make Kushner, who's married to Ivanka, of course, eligible to view some of the United States' most closely guarded secrets and sell them, including the daily intelligence briefing that Mr. Trump receives and the delicate intelligence on Israelis and Palestinians that former diplomats said can be valuable in negotiations. Not that he was using any of it. Top secret clearances are typically required for people viewing foreign intelligence or sitting in on high-level White House meetings. White House officials were adamant that the lengthy process was not unusual for a government official who has a complicated financial history and many foreign contacts. That might be true, which is why very many of them are rarely given such jobs. But with the special counsel investigating some of Mr. Kushner's meetings with Russian officials, it left open the question of whether investigators had uncovered evidence that made him a security threat. Quick answer here is they have, but he's getting his security clearance anyway. If you really can't wait for why that's happening, the answer is the White House can do whatever the F it wants on this. I mean, they were going through the process because some people think process is important, but ultimately the president can pretty much do what he wants on issues of national security, on clearances. He can just basically just grant them, or he can waive the necessity for having a security clearance by declassifying anything he wants to tell somebody who doesn't have security clearance. And if he accidentally tells somebody something before declassifying it, he can retroactively declassify it so that there's no harm, no foul, because I just what would you say? I mean, I defouled. It's not a word. The breach here. I broke the law and told somebody something that was classified when they shouldn't have heard it. I can retroactively erase the crime by saying, well, I declassified that. Really, that's a power that's granted to the presidency in this stupid scheme that we built for ourselves around classification and national security. Remember, that wasn't in the Constitution or anything. The founders didn't have, they understood the value of secrecy, but they didn't write the regulations regarding security clearances. But it's been viewed in the evolution of our governing system. It's been viewed as a presidential prerogative, an executive power, inherent executive power granted to the president, and which he usually delegates to outside agencies, that is, agencies outside the White House itself. The agencies that are interested in getting their personnel security clearances are the ones who are responsible for running the process, initiating the process, and seeing it to its conclusion so that people can get their security clearances. There's a little more information on that to come yet. But yeah, it's the president's ability to classify or declassify, or to grant security clearances or to deny security clearances. And because ordinarily he's a busy person, he delegates that authority, has got wide authority to delegate that authority to an official process and, and an official bureaucracy, usually embedded in each one of the departments and coordinated. All the research is done by the FBI, but it's other people handle that. I can't be bothered with the details of that, even though the ultimate authority for it rests and vests in me. It only becomes an issue that it originates with the president when he personally disagrees with a conclusion that gets drawn, or he gets himself into trouble and has to declassify something after the fact, you see. So, with the special counsel's investigation going on then, the fact that Kushner had not yet gotten a permanent security clearance made people think, the investigation is turning up information that makes it impossible for the bureaucracy that does this to finish the process and grant him the security clearance. And once it's granted, that will mean that the official bureaucracy that runs national security clearances will have seen what it needs to see to satisfy itself that there isn't anything out there that presents enough of a danger that they can continue to deny the clearance. That's not actually the process. But that this has been drawn as the conclusion speaks most probably to spin being offered to the authors of these articles from the White House or elsewhere that most people won't be able to, won't have any reason to suspect, one, and won't have any ability to see through, number two. But thankfully, it's a known fact and it's been disseminated by others, and we have it at our disposal. The special counsel, Mueller, is investigating whether anyone around Mr. Trump conspired with the Russian government, blah, blah, blah. Mr. Kushner's meetings with the Russian ambassador, a Kremlin-connected lawyer, and a prominent Russian banker have all attracted scrutiny. The resolution of his clearance does not guarantee that Mr. Kushner faces no legal jeopardy. But Mark Zaid, a veteran Washington lawyer who handles security clearances, said it was highly unlikely that the special counsel would uncover evidence of improper foreign entanglements and not flag it for security officials. But that don't matter. If I were Jared Kushner, I'd be sighing a breath of relief today, said Mr. Zaid. And it's hard to believe that he's got no idea that it could be totally incompatible with that sort of confidence in Kushner that he gets his security clearance. But there it is. The special counsel's investigation has not caused the delay, said Mr. Kushner's lawyer, Abby Lowell, who, by the way, just recently left his firm and joined a totally different one for no apparent reason. I don't know why. He just did. With respect to the news about his clearances, as we stated before, his application was properly submitted, reviewed by numerous career officials, true, and underwent the normal process, to an extent also true, said Mr. Lowell. Having completed all of these processes, he's looking forward to continuing to do the work the president has asked him to do. Very carefully crafted. Mr. Lowell is not in trouble. He just will not have told you, A, what this really means, or B, anything about how this really happened. Mr. Kushner has outlasted some of his chief White House rivals, including Reince Priebus and Stephen Bannon, but his relationship with the current chief of staff, John Kelly, deteriorated from almost the very beginning, and Mr. Trump, who once considered Kushner a trusted advisor, continues to tell friends he wishes that Jared and Ivanka would return to New York, although Mr. Trump has not voiced this view to his daughter and Mr. Kushner in several months. The clearance announcement will not drastically change Kushner's ability to play peacemaker in the Middle East. He never had any ability. Even without a top-secret clearance, he was able to attend meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other top Israeli officials. A White House spokesman did not respond to a message seeking comment. Kushner's clearances were approved by career officials after the completion of the FBI background check, and the president was not involved in the process, according to the person briefed on the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because clearance decisions are supposed to be secret. But guess what? I have information elsewhere that suggests none of that is true, or at least not the important parts of it. Rather, that the clearances were not approved by career officials, though there was a completion of the FBI background check, and that the president was involved in the process. Oh my, how about that for a surprise? Mr. Lowell said that Mr. Kushner has cooperated fully with the special counsel and met with Mr. Mueller's investigators twice for many hours. In each occasion, he answered all questions asked and did whatever he could to expedite the conclusion of the investigations. Mr. Lowell said. That also likely true, but not helpful. Kushner was among several White House officials who spent the first year of the administration working under provisional clearances, meaning he was allowed to view classified information while his FBI background check was pending. Those interim clearances became stand-ins for the larger Washington debate over links between members of the Trump campaign and Russian officials. Mr. Trump's team steadfastly denied any such contacts, only to have journalists and investigators uncover one undisclosed meeting after another. Like 40 or something for Kushner, right? Mr. Kushner met the campaign, during the campaign with a Russian lawyer. You know all about that one, the Trump Tower meeting. During the presidential transition, he met with the Russian ambassador and the head of a Russian state-owned bank. But when he applied for a security clearance, he didn't disclose any of those meetings. Actually, it was like 40-something corrections he's had to make to his financial disclosure, right? I think that was it. His lawyer said the application was filed inadvertently while the form was still in progress. They said he didn't conceal Russian contacts. He hadn't yet begun completing that section. That's it. That's like the bulk of the body of the application. I didn't get to that section. I just inadvertently gave them the application without filling any of it out, you see. All right. Well, Kushner amended the form and was interviewed by Congress about his Russian contacts. He denied any collusion, etc. Congressional Democrats clamored for more information about Mr. Kushner's clearances. In February, amid questions about an aide who kept his interim clearances despite accusations of domestic violence, the White House stripped Kushner and others of their provisional access to classified information. That led only to new questions about Mr. Kushner's relationship with Mr. Kelly and his future in the White House. And in addition to his work on Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, Kushner acts as intermediary with Mexico. Sure, why not? Pushing for reforms to federal prisons and is working on reversing the North American Free Trade Agreement. What a portfolio. So, why do I keep saying that this article may have something or all things wrong? And the answer is, maybe there's a problem with this answer, but this is the answer I have from Congressman Don Beyer, Democrat of Virginia. He has a short-ish tweet storm about it. It's not even really all that long. Today, he says, that was yesterday, the White House and Jared Kushner's representatives are saying that the decision to grant Mr. Kushner's clearance was made by career personnel and that this decision was the deserved outcome of an above-board process. Both claims are false or misleading. The claim that Kushner's clearance was granted by, quote, career personnel and not the White House contradicts, you'll never guess who, the FBI, which told us, that is to say, Congress, quote, the granting or suspension of Mr. Kushner's clearance would be the responsibility of the client adjudication entity, in this case, the White House. And there is a letter reprinted in full here that I think explains some of it. It is a letter, in fact, to Jerry Nadler, who would be, I guess, what? Is he the ranking member? What did he get? Judiciary Committee? Is that what he ended up getting? I forget what they handed to Nadler. But, okay. Here, a letter from Gregory Brower, Assistant Director of the FBI, I guess. It says Assistant Director, but maybe if I click on the thing, will I see his full? Yes. Oh, he is the Assistant Director, of the Office of Congressional Affairs at the FBI. And he writes, therefore, to the to Congressman Nadler, this responds to your letter dated April 13th, 2017, to Director Comey. This is a long time ago. And this letter, by the way, in response is also a long time ago. It's May 11th, 2017. He didn't wait that long to answer. But Nadler writes to then Director Comey and Charles S. Phelan, Director of the National Background Investigations Bureau, Office of Personnel Management, expressing concern regarding allegations that an advisor to the president did not disclose information during his application process for a top secret security clearance. A similar response will be sent to other members who joined in your letter. The FBI, they explain in this letter, is the investigative service provider responsible for conducting thorough and comprehensive background investigations on behalf of the president, president-elect, and respective designees. These clients submit requests for security clearances for any newly assigned individuals to the transition team, other national security positions, and proposed cabinet-level officials. The FBI itself does not grant, deny, or otherwise adjudicate security clearances for individuals on behalf of these clients. As a result, the granting or suspension of Mr. Kushner's clearance would be the responsibility of the client adjudication entity, in this case, the White House. And then he just signs off. We appreciate your continued support for the FBI and its mission. Sincerely, Gregory A. Brower, Assistant Director, Office of Congressional Affairs. So what does it mean? It's simply a reminder that the fact that he's gotten his security clearance, one, doesn't mean that the FBI thinks he does deserve it, or doesn't, for that matter, deserve it. It is simply, well, we've conducted our background check, and here's what we found, and we don't know what those things are. They hand that to the client agency. If you are Secretary of State, presumably the State Department requests your security clearance, and they ask the FBI to do that work. And the FBI goes through its regular process and then hands a report back to State. And State says, based on the fact that all reporting is that this guy is an active Russian spy, let us say no to his security clearance. Or, in most cases, given that the investigation shows no particular reason to be concerned about this person's loyalty to the United States and penchant for truthfulness, we will go ahead and grant that security clearance. If you're working in the White House is the client that requests, hey, FBI, check this person out. Give us your report. Here's the report. He's a total spy and a gigantic security risk. And the White House has the opportunity to say, on its own volition, because that's the entity to whom the president, with whom this authority ultimately rests, has designated, has assigned that task. The Office of Personnel in the White House says, okay, FBI, I disagree with your assessment, or I agree with your assessment, but I'm giving Jared Kushner the security clearance anyway. It is a total misunderstanding, and one that is being purposefully perpetrated, really, here in this article by people spinning on behalf of the White House that some outside entity is the one that does this. And I think it's easy to believe. Most people probably believe, well, surely it is the FBI since they do the investigating. who says whether or not a security clearance can be granted or not. And technically, that's just not true. It's just usually the case that if the FBI's investigation comes back with a negative report, nobody would be stupid or crazy enough to grant a security clearance to that person anyway, because people will find out. But this administration doesn't care about that or believe that anyone will find out. Or if they do, they believe they can say, well, we've worked so hard on discrediting the press that we can just say fake news to it and everybody moves on. And some people say, I accept that it is fake news. Others of us simply roll our eyes and say, one more thing to put on a David Frum listicle. And what are we going to do about that? And that's where we are. Nobody's going to stop Jared Kushner from claiming to have a security clearance. It's going to happen. He's got it. And apparently something like 50 to 60% of the world, or at least of this country, similarly believe that the Mueller investigation has resulted in no findings of any wrongdoing at all, despite the fact that there are so many indictments and, in fact, convictions out there. And I guess the same people who believe, well, we definitely found the WMD. Remember those trucks, which were not the things that we said they were? And I guess that same number of people will now say, I don't know, the FBI investigated him and he's got the security clearance, so the FBI must think it's okay. But then, of course, when necessary, turn around and say, oh, also the FBI sucks and they're horrible and they're the criminal deep state. Okay, whatever. All right, time for us to wrap up for the day. Maybe the thing I might dive into just for fun, because it's always a good summary of everything going on. Mark Sumner's article from yesterday. Loved the title. This isn't stupid Watergate, this whole Trump thing. It's even stupider Pizzagate. And it may just be the end game. Here's what he's talking about. Donald Trump's morning Twitter blasts from yesterday, in which he's treating documents he hasn't ever seen as definitive proof that his campaign wasn't the cause but the victim of a conspiracy, may seem nonsensical, because they are, but they're also representative of a narrative that has been building on the right, an interwoven nest of terms, memes, themes, and theories that's now been put together into a terrifying mass hallucination. We've gone past stupid Watergate. This is even stupider Pizzagate. And it all looks too sickeningly like the end game. From day one, Trump has been putting down the markers, the deep state, the Obama FBI, the 13 Democrats. It didn't matter that none of it was true. The 13 Democrats, he says, running the investigation, who are almost all of whom are Republicans, but okay. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Like everything in the alt-right, it becomes true through repetition. Pizzagate, the astoundingly improbable, brain-achingly idiotic conspiracy that had Democratic operatives, including, of course, Hillary Clinton, operating a child sex slavery ring out of a D.C. area pizzeria, developed on the alt-right in fits and starts. It started with a single Reddit post that made dozens of allegations about Comet Pizza that were immediately and provably nonsense. That didn't matter. Within weeks, a man drove up from North Carolina to send employees and customers running with an AR-15 as he searched the establishment for the hidden rooms and pedophilia murals that he knew were there. All it took was a little crowdsourced mass psychosis that included scanning Google Street View images for signs of butterflies and creating a dictionary to translate sex trafficking that was oh so cleverly encoded as pizza orders. Just because something is fundamentally stupid and utterly lacking in the first thing that resembles a fact doesn't mean it won't gain adherents. That's particularly true if the idea isn't popping up spontaneously in response to a single soon-deleted post, but is being carefully tended, groomed, nurtured, and expanded by a broad spectrum of right-wing media and daily infusions from Donald Trump, who happens to be president of the United States, allegedly. That kind of attention can grow a conspiracy theory that's more elaborate than the plot of Westworld and equally capable of ensnaring millions into making their own, quote, discoveries, creating their own fan theories, and building an ever more convoluted and ugly idea. And that's where we are, even stupider Pizzagate. Reminds me of QAnon, right? We forgot about that for the moment. And it's starting to look like the most dangerous moment since Trump's election. I'll just finish up here with one more paragraph that appears above the fold and leave it to you to read the rest. The idea that the FBI, DOJ, CIA, every government agency, no matter what it is or what its actual affiliation, is and always has been an instrument of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton may seem just as silly and just as provably false as claims that a pizza place was covered in sex murals. After all, the FBI and CIA have long been strongly tied to the Republican Party. But that's been true ever since the last Democratic director of the FBI. And there has never been a Democratic director of the FBI. But again, it doesn't matter, because whether it's Republican Professor Stephen Halper, I guess, or Republican Robert Mueller, or Republican James Comey, or any Republican at all, an actual history of working with the party for decades no longer matters. Anyone who crosses Trump is a traitor, and the new name for traitor is Democrat. It's very, very easy to compose a sentence in which the phrase "the 13 Democrats" is paired to the words "up against the wall." You'll have to read the rest for yourself, of course, because we're out of time. Time, though, for Justice Putnam to take you into everything else
From Daily Kos Radio
that we missed
on
today.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Plus some great elaborations on all those things we have been hitting on today. The NFL policy, the Trump selling out of America to the highest bidder. Robert Mueller asking a federal judge to move ahead with the sentencing, though, of George Papadopoulos. That's news that he'll be examining as well. And much, much more. Stay tuned.